Chris Martin with Creative Domain, and today's quick tip tutorial is getting scene information in and out of Realflow using Cinema 4D. So we have this basic scene set up with two cubes and a plane, and we've got an animation in here where the top cube is going to pour liquid into the bottom cube. Just want to mention a couple things. The cubes are about 500 by 500 by 500, and well, the top cube is, and the bottom cube I made it a little wider so we wouldn't have any of the liquid dropping out of it. In previous versions of Realflow, you needed to take your elements and you needed to triangulate all of these. So you would go up to Functions, Triangulate. But in the newest version of Realflow, that's not required anymore. So let's go ahead and get this ready for export. We're going to go to the Plugins menu, go to Next Limit, and you get this. You can download this plugin off of the Next Limit website. And we're going to use the Realflow Sd Export. Now that stands for Scene Data. And we're going to make sure that we've got all of the objects in the scene selected, and we're going to give it an output path, and we're going to click Save SD File. So now when we go over to Realflow, we'll give it a name and a path, and create the project. Now we're going to import the scene file, and there we go. So we've got our two boxes in our plane representing the floor, and we've got the animation that's built in. We're going to put a little gravity in here, and I'm going to put an emitter, a square emitter. I'm going to drag that up and use this to fill the top box with, and we're going to make that a little bigger. Looks about right. I'm going to lock my timeline right here, and that's because I don't want to record any keyframes at this time. I just want to fill this box up first. So I'm going to set my speed to 5 and leave everything else at default, and I'm going to click Simulate, and my particles are filling up the box. So I'm going to pause this video until it's done, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so we're back. The water has settled a bit, as you can see. The only thing else that I did while we were away is I put a kill volume around the scene, and that's in case any of these particles, when it's pouring, if they get loose and they come out of the box and they start falling, then we don't want the program to have to calculate those particular particles, because it's just tying up computer resource. So if they go outside of this box, they'll automatically be killed. So important to remember. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unselect this little box right here in my timeline, and now when I hit Simulate, it's going to start recording keyframes. So you can see that it leaves a little orange bar behind it, so it's starting to calculate, and you can see that the box is starting to tip over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it again and let this simulate out, and I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so we're back. The simulation is completed. We ended up going 200 frames, so what we'll end up doing is when we get back into Cinema 4D, we will adjust the timeline to accommodate the 200 frames. So let's just let's go to frame 1 and play through it, and you can see that our particles pour out of the top box. And they go into the bottom box. So what we need to do now is go through the meshing process. So excuse me, I am going to get to a point where I've got a thin layer of particles, and this is something you just really have to play around with. This is there's no exact science to doing this, but what we need to do is we need to put a mesh object in our scene, okay, and it has automatically put the fluid under the mesh object. If it doesn't, you can right click and say insert all fluids. Now if we go to the mesh, we're going to change the polygon size to 0.03. We're going to come to, these are things that I have just by playing around with it have found that work pretty well. There's about 4 different parameters here that I'll change. We want to turn the filter method to yes, the relaxation to 0.1, the tension to 0.1, steps to 64, and then I'm going to actually go to the square, the emitter, and we'll change that to about 93, and change this to 0.02. Now if we come to our mesh, right click and say build, you can see down here it's calculating, and it has built our mesh for us. So let's go to view, element, smooth shaded, and that's kind of what we're looking for here. Again, you can play with this, and you know, this is really an art, creating your mesh properly. But once you get it to a place that you feel comfortable, looks right for your particular project, you need to go to the very beginning of the scene and have the mesh selected and click on this button up here, which is build mesh. Okay, so the meshing process is now complete, and by the way, I didn't mention before you start building your mesh, you need to go to export all, or you go to export central and select everything that you want to be exported, and this sends everything. Whenever you initially created your file, it created all of these subfolders, and your meshes were sent over to the meshes folder there, and that's where all those are. So now we're going to go back into Cinema 4D, and we want to adjust our timeline to accommodate the 200 frames that Realflow used. And let's just get this somewhere where you can see what's going on. There we go. We'll go to, say, 120. We're going to go to plugins, next limit, and we want to get the this top plugin, the Realflow Mesh Loader, and come down to the sequence, and we're going to navigate to that meshes folder, which is right here. Select the first one, click open, and there you go. You can see our, let's put a material on that, you can see our mesh has come in. Now I can't run this through the timeline for you because the computer will lock up, but, and the other thing I just want to mention, if you'll notice back here in Realflow, the number of particles that we used was set at 20,000. I believe was this is not the correct number. It was set at 20,000. That's how many particles we had in our scene. There you go, 20,184. Typically, if you were going to do a scene like this, you know, maybe 70, 80,000 particles would be adequate for a simulation like this. That's why it looks so sparse right here. But that is basically how you get information in and out of Cinema 4D when you're dealing with Realflow. So I'll go ahead and render this out and show you the final version, but do remember, if you're going to do it yourself, I would recommend using far more particles than 20,000. Anyway, that's the quick tip for today. I hope that helps.